321. Craig is spot on about the attempt to politicize people who don't get to go to games or support something as being racist or whatever, or sexist.
Yeah, I just see that lazy attack on people when they don't just adhere to the common thought. Is just, oh, well, you're a racist. You don't want black players to get paid, or you're a sexist. You don't want this to happen. And I just think that there, in general, the majority of people who have any sort of complaint about NIL is, again, it's about just the chaotic nature of it. And I think we've completely abused the term Wild Wild West at this point. Everybody's used that, and maybe that's just the way to describe it. I just call it more of just chaos, and unintended but totally predictable. And so I don't think anybody's surprised we're sitting in this spot. Could have predicted this 2 years ago. But yeah, just because somebody doesn't think that it should just be free reign all the time doesn't make them a bad person or anti-athlete or any of that. It just makes them somebody who wants to see some type of structure, and that's totally fine. It doesn't make them any wrong or any more right than you. It's just a difference of opinion, and leave it at that.
From Antoine, players will use NIL collective monies to pay for schooling. If they end up not having scholarship money, I guess that could be something that's down the road.
But right now they're getting full rides, so I don't see that going away. Maybe
I don't see them giving that up either.
No, but the athletes that don't get a full ride is where NIL might come in to pay for some school, because, football gets a full ride, men's basketball gets a full ride, and then everything else is kind of subject to, and even basketball and football have their divisions among things, but, everything else is kind of subject to, the rules of breaking up the total number of scholarships they have. So, for example, what does baseball get, 13.1 or 11.2 or whatever it is? And they can't give full scholarships to anybody based on the rules. They have to give it's allotted amounts, and so there's all these things that can happen. So
yeah, and I'm just thinking on football terms, to be totally honest with you. So yeah, you do have other partial scholarships that definitely helps pay for their schooling. That's an important deal for tennis players or volleyball players or whoever else. But yeah, the attention is on the football and basketball side most when it comes to this, because that's where we're seeing the rumors about $3 million and things of that nature floating around, which is, hey, again, great for the players. But yeah, for those other sports that aren't, just fully compensated, that is great for them. That is a benefit.
Matt in D.C., the federal government fights over giving money to disabled veterans and 911 responders, and people think they'll be fast on
9/11.
NIL.
Yeah.
9/11. I'm sorry, Godly, excuse me, 9/11. Also, Antoine, it's a societal issue. Unfortunately, people care less about our service members. Craig, Paul and I were talking about this. My father, up until basically the day he died, Craig's grandfather, Paul's dad, passed away 7 years ago, the same year, in 15. Both served our country. My dad was fighting up until the day he died, not at any high level, but for veterans to make sure that their spouses and or continued to get the insurance after they were gone.
Yeah.
And up until the day he died, he was very passionate about that.
Yeah. My dad was lucky in that he retired from a company that he worked at after he was in the military with full medical benefits that doesn't cover 100% of everything, but it was close. And then the government stuff covered the rest of it. And my mom has gotten that for the last 7 years, but it's not that easy for everybody. It's not that easy. And the government fought over that. So this is, as much as they will say, and I'm kind of surprised that this one, though, doesn't get moved to the top, because this is kind of low-hanging fruit. This is an easier problem to solve than they're willing to admit, at least to throw out a law to put some kind of light guardrails in. But again, in an election year, it's going to be all bravado and different things like that. And college athletes making money and the transfer portal is not going to get any, there's not going to be a commercial with a guy, chopping wood saying, well, I support our college athletes, but I think this and this, I support this message. No, it's just not going to happen this year. So.
RH5, so here is the negative perspective. If Title IX guarantees scholarships for women, could universities stop giving scholarships altogether and use NIL money to end non-profitable sports? One of the other parts about, there are the thoughts that if this NIL thing continues, and we're not against it, got to kind of every once in a while kind of do a re-rack, you wonder if, in fact, and Todd Berry mentioned this, if they're then become employees.
Well, I mentioned that, and yeah, then he talked about it as well. I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now, and everybody's throwing out their ideas for this and that. I mean, that's the only way I see this getting to a point where the schools themselves have any type of defense against the athlete, because right now they have absolutely none, basically. And so, yeah, and I don't think that's the road they want to go down, because then that opens up a whole nother can of worms as far as what they have to adhere to rules-wise, and the employee status and things like that. It definitely is a change from being labeled as a student athlete, which some will say, hey, that was a robbery the whole time, labeling them as student athletes. So, maybe that's correcting itself the way that it needs to be. But right now, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not smart enough. That's why I wish the chat would, illuminate us when they can. But that's the only way that I see where you can actually have any type of meaningful enforcement of anything would be to have the employee status. But again, that changes everything about all of this.
And if you collectively bargain something, then that's the contract true.
Then you're talking about unions, and you're talking, yeah.
But what can happen is if student athletes become employees, and if Title IX, the rule is you have to provide equal number of opportunities to men and women athletes, then there will be sports on both sides. Not just women, but on both sides that get cut, because they'll be, okay, well, then we're only going to have 6 sports instead of 26 because this is all we're going to pay for. And guess what? You're compliant within the law because you've chosen, 3 men's sports and 3 women's sports, and you're done.
One of the things that
who cares? Who cares? That's that's basically the message from people who don't want to look at that side of it and just are looking at it from a pure football perspective or a pure basketball perspective. They get gaga over, the Miami story or over Jordan Addison, and don't realize, you cheered on, and again, great for the athletes, but there are unintended consequences to everything. And are we really dealing with a group of people that have tremendous foresight or the ability to act quickly, even if they do have that foresight? I think time has proven out that no, we're not dealing with that group of people. We're dealing with a group of people who do not have a lot of power right now. So, yeah, I mean, that's a question for probably a little farther down the road, but that would not be good. That would not be good at all, in my opinion, to start having to eliminate other sports. Now, I also don't want us to approach doomsday scenario where, you get there's one negative to it and you act like, nuke bombs are going to start falling on college sports. It's not that, but there could be some collateral damage that, is unintended that I don't think betters us as people or as young people or as, people in athletics. So hopefully that's not the case, but it would not be surprising at this point.
One note from Paula on Paul, what you and I, what we were talking about, veterans benefits. David, we were so fortunate that my mother received all of my father's medical benefits from his service in the Air Force. It made taking care of her so much easier not to worry about the medical bills. And I understand that, and thank God that's the case. Juan M, shout out, go Cougars. University of Houston, the helmet we've added to our overall set, among others, and we will add more along the way. We appreciate that as well. Colt McCoy today at 4:50, and former Texas Tech quarterback Rodney Allison. That's going to be fun at around 5:10 today. Both of them are going to be inducted this Saturday evening into the Texas High School Football Hall of Fame at the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, just off the campus and off 35 in University Parks in Waco as well. Let's see here. There was one other. And personally, I think if you're getting the full ride and scholarship money, this is old school, then you shouldn't be getting paid millions of NIL or vice versa. Now, again, we use that word millions. There are some that we know are getting big boy money, like 7 figures, right? And God knows we may even see some that may be getting 8. But for the most part, that's the exception. That is as old school as it gets. I was once that person that if you're on scholarship, my God, you should not get paid anything else. And then they started opening up cost of living, or they started having other. I've opened my mind to this.
Owen, the difference is that the money is not coming from the university; it's coming from outside of it. So you're saying that just because you have so should kids on a full academic scholarship not be able to go get a job at Chili's? Because that's kind of what you're saying. If you have full academic ride from the school, then the private sector is off limits to you. And that was part of the problem with NIL.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So
you could not go deliver. You couldn't go deliver pizzas for Domino's.
Yeah.
You could not go get a job.
You can't box in what a player's value is, and attach a tag to it like it's a shirt on sale on a rack. I mean, it's unlimited. I don't know, was it Todd Berry that said this? I don't think some guy might be worth $2 million, but if some school believes he is, then he is. And that's where it will probably spiral. Is you will have the bigger schools that keep bidding each other, and you are going to inflate this. And hey, that'll be their problem to worry about because only a certain select will be able to play in that pool. But there's nothing stopping that, and that's free reign. Because as soon as you start trying to put a cap on something, that's where you start getting the screaming and the yelling about, well, you can't do that, and that's not legal and all of that. So no, you can't box that up. But I will go back to my comment from yesterday is I do think that one thing I would like to shoot a hole through, and I know this is not the story for every single school necessarily, but for the most part, the whole idea of this being modern day slavery and student athletes being ill-treated and things like that. There's a lot of athletes at most schools out there that are treated very, very well when it comes to board, when it comes to merchandise, when it comes to food, when it comes to travel, when it comes to surgeries, when it comes to all that. So I'm not saying they don't deserve to get money. Again, all for that. I'm tired of having to repeat that. But let's also not be disingenuous. And this is not anybody in particular saying this, but this is just something you've seen over the years of, they're, basically hand to mouth, just trying to even survive. And I know back in the day, that might have been the case in some ways, but like in this era, I think everybody's pretty well taken care of. Now that doesn't necessarily pay bills back at home, and people do come from struggling backgrounds. So NIL is really important for, folks who do need that money for other reasons outside of just their own pure enjoyment. But yeah, let's not act like there's just nothing that you just show up and it's just go to school, go to class, and you get nothing in return. There is, some level of comfort that is provided by the